my dad, and it was right after the Ahmaud Arbery. And if you don't know about that, that was before the whole George Floyd thing. He was running, and I don't know exactly all the details before that, but I do know that he was going for a run, and there were two men that followed him with a gun, and it eventually shot him. It took about 3 or 4 months for those people to be arrested. So this is my dad.
Good morning, people. It is Thursday morning. It is, I believe it's May 9th. I have no idea what day it is. It kind of gets that way. So this morning, there will be music, but not quite yet. There will be music, but not quite yet. We gather together on these mornings every morning, and I know I'm here because the music reminds me to be joyful and remember, even in the middle of whatever our circumstances are, that joy can be found. And so that was challenged yesterday significantly. And so in the pursuit of being transparent, I have to tell you that I struggled mightily yesterday. And I'll tell you why. And I'm not sure whether you're going to want to play this in your team meetings this morning, so I'm telling you that right now, just in case you're doing this live. So back in February, in a little town about 4.5-hour drive from me, Brunswick, Georgia, there was a young man that was jogging through a neighborhood, and I don't want to just say young man, I want to call his name. It's Ahmaud Arbery. He was jogging through a neighborhood, and apparently he passed by a gentleman or a man that was standing in his front yard. And the man standing in his front yard, when Mr. Arbery jogged by, thought that Mr. Arbery reminded him of someone that, or looked like he fit the description of someone that had been breaking into homes in that neighborhood. So that guy went into his house, called his son. He and his son collected their weapons, a .357 Magnum and a shotgun. And they got in their pickup truck, one standing in the bed of the pickup truck, and began to pursue Mr. Arbery through the neighborhood. They called out to him to stop. They yelled at him over and over again. In fact, there was some part of the 911 call where the 911 operator asked what was going on, and the response was, "There's a black man running down my street." Mr. Arbery changed directions and running a few times, and each time he changed directions, the truck pursued him until he was cornered. The son of the guy that was in the front yard got out of the truck with his shotgun and approached Mr. Arbery. A scuffle ensued, and Mr. Arbery was shot twice with a shotgun and lied dead in the street. So I share this with you because this actually happened in February, but social media yesterday was lit up with it, and you would know based on who you have on your friends list, you might not have seen it at all, or you might have seen it every 10 seconds or so. And I should have said this before I go much further. Don't do a lot of commenting about where this goes on any political spectrum, because I really don't have any interest in that this morning. What I just want you to know is that it angered me, and it angered a lot of people, and it angered a lot of people that you know. And it's because anger is part of grief, because that's what a lot of people are feeling. Again, the 5 stages of grief are denial, can't believe this is happening again. Anger, which is where I'm moving through. Negotiation, well, maybe if he hadn't done this or that, maybe it wouldn't have happened. Sadness, and then acceptance. But not just grief for Mr. Arbery and his family, but grief because some things just refuse to die. And so why am I telling you all this? Well, that's really only the first part of the story. So yesterday I had a call that was scheduled with a really good friend of mine, a white friend of mine. And by the way, I didn't want to say it happens to be a white friend of mine. That kills me when people say it happens to be. Like, I'm just doing that to add color for the story. A white friend of mine, and I actually texted him in advance of the call and kind of let him know that I was my spirit wasn't good, and told him why, and in the text. And gently put, his response was, "What the hell?" And then he told me to call him. So I called him, and he asked me a couple of questions. And this is where we get to the joy part. So keep listening. Before I tell you what questions he asked, let me tell you what questions he did not ask. So he did not ask the questions that I referred to as the what caused it questions. So he didn't ask why the guy was in the neighborhood. He didn't ask why he didn't stop when he was called out to by civilians that had weapons and a pickup truck that was chasing him. He didn't ask did the guy have a record. He didn't ask whether the guy was on drugs. He didn't ask if the guy jogging had a weapon. He didn't ask any of those questions. In fact, he also didn't ask what I call the diluting questions. So he didn't ask, isn't all killing bad? And he didn't ask, well, what about when black people kill other black people? Isn't that bad? He didn't ask any of those questions. Let me tell you the questions he asked me. Here's the first one. He said, is Alpha going? Now, for some of you, that doesn't have any context, so let me give it a little context. I am a life member, a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, the oldest fraternity in this country for men of African American, intercollegiate fraternity for men of African American descent. And by the way, there are white alphas, there are Asian alphas, there are Latino alphas. So alphas come of all stripes, but I'm an alpha. And the fact that he asked me if Alpha's going told me that my friend understood what I was part of beyond just business and social stuff. And that meant a lot to me because he knows that my organization at the core is also about social justice. So I love that. Then he asked me this. He said, well, if Alpha goes, are you going? And I said, wow. And I told him, they're not, those plans have not been formatted. I'm in Georgia. It happened in Georgia. Likely that would be the case. And then he said, well, if you go, if it's okay with you, he said, I want you to know that I'll come too and stand next to you. And there was joy. So there will be music this morning. And for those of you who are trying to figure out, well, who is that? Who would actually say that to Greg? What friend was that? That's not really the big question. The big question is, would you be that friend? And now to the music.
Ooh. So, I have to get my. That can be hard to watch for me because my dad is a black man, So, whew. I hope you guys found that to be at least interesting because that's what we're talking about is finding a way that you can be a real ally. And I appreciate all of you asking questions and everybody this is not just white people in here. There's all types of people here that come from different places, different backgrounds and have a different story than I do. But the idea is that this is how you can help. So I'm happy to answer questions and we have a couple more, but I think that was a great Thank you for reminding me to share that. Every time I watch it, I'm like, dang it, Dad.